What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and I'm joined as ever by Aidan and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. We'll be recapping games against the Celtics and the Pistons, as well as talking some newly released jerseys, asking when we'll see the Nets at full strength, the ever-looming subject of new additions to the roster, as well as listener questions and much, much more. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK to UK Pod, and follow us on YouTube where you can watch all of our episodes back. But with that out of the way, gentlemen, let's get into it. This week, the Nets released yet another jersey. It takes us up to 6 on the season. What do you think? What do you guys make of the new one, the earned jersey?
I absolutely love it. I mean, I think it's been a bit like Marmite on Twitter and in our Discord. It seems to be people either absolutely love it or they absolutely hate it. But it's probably my favourite jersey that we've had this season for a couple of reasons, really. I think kind of on a personal note, during obviously trips to New York, the experience of a Nets game begins when you're on the subway ride to the Barclays Centre and then you're coming up the elevator and obviously seeing the arena and all of its glory. So I like how they're kind of celebrating that journey, because I do think it is a big part of the Nets, the fact that they sit right on top of a subway station, which I really like. Also, for my OCD, the fact that the Nets font on the jersey matches the Brooklyn Nets font on the home court is absolutely lovely. And the fact that the subway style trim on the side of the jersey actually goes around the home court as well. I only noticed that when they were actually playing the game, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. So yeah, again, another jersey that says Nets in the front, celebrating the Nets as an organisation. So yeah, I think it looks really cool.
I'm a massive fan of this one. I think in one of the first episodes, just after we'd announced the Basquiat jersey, I did actually say at the time, how nice would that jersey be if it didn't have all the kind of blue, yellow and red detail, and it was just kind of herringbone background, nice and plain. And yeah, the Nets have answered my prayers and have come out with this absolute beauty. I mean, when the leaks first came out, I wasn't too keen on the numbering, but then when I seen it kind of also in action, yeah, completely fell in love with it. And it's certainly one of the best ones we've got this season.
Yeah, it's killer. I mean, there's plenty to choose from this season with the Icon, Association, Statement, City, Classic, and now Earned, which obviously teams only get for making the playoffs last season. I'm approaching my mid-30s, so any excuse to be pessimistic, but I just can't be mad at a jersey drop. Like the way they did it on social with all like the cool close-ups of all the details. The typography was beautiful. The numbering was beautiful. I love how simple it is, how it just says Nets smashed across it. Obviously, there's been a lot of pressure from, I think, New Jersey fans, OG fans, to have a couple more jerseys with Nets written on it rather than Brooklyn. As you kind of touched on, Cammy, the herringbone is sort of done on the Basquiat jersey, but it just looks so dope. You forgive it anyway. It's nice that, talking about jersey news, it's sort of the Nets had 3 players in the top 5 selling jerseys, according to the NBA.eu store, which is really cool. So KD was at number 2, Harden was at number 3, and Kyrie was at number 4. So that's really, really cool. Obviously, seeing more people in more Nets jerseys as you get about, hopefully. But I'm gonna put you guys on the spot. If you could rank the top 3 jerseys from this season, where would you go?
So I think for my number 1, I've got to go for the classic. Obviously, paying homage to those kind of great jerseys from the 90s, the Drummond Petrovic era. And I think that it's a really nice modern twist on it. It just looks absolutely superb. The coat to match is wonderful, and also all the kind of social media stuff they do alongside it. Love that. I think the new Earned jersey is going to go right in at second. It's only been out a couple of days, but yeah, it's wonderful, and I'm a big fan of it. And then probably third, it'll probably just have to be a classic black and white. It's just, you can't go wrong with black and white. So yeah, they're my top 3.
Yeah, I actually think that Earned is definitely my favourite this year. So I'll put that as my number 1. I'll put the classic as number 2, just purely because it's so nice to wear a different colour as a Nets fan. Like, it's quite nice to have the blue for a bit of a change. I love the classic black and white, but paying homage back to the New Jersey days is really nice, and it's a great jersey on as well. And then, yeah, I'll go for the Basquiat third, just because I love a wacky jersey, and it's as wacky as they come. So yeah, that's my top 3 this year.
Nice. Yeah, I think it might just be recency bias, but that Earn jersey is very, very tasty. That's just in my head, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people tapping up the Nets store when it does come. I think it's the 18th it comes out. Whether or not we'll be able to get our hands on them, we shall see. I'm going to say honorable mention to the one I've got. The people watching along on YouTube are going to see that I've got the Jordan Brand grey statement jersey, Eric Hayes jersey, which I really, really love. Hayes has done a couple of Nike collabs in back in the day, which kind of gives me a little bit of a soft spot for him. But yeah, it's a toss-up between the classic jersey or just the crisp white association jersey, because I think that's really, really clean. But I'm going to go with the blue. I need to cop it before it goes. That's one I haven't got in the collection. I'm going to get myself a number 12 Joey Buckets classic edition. I think that'll be a perfect one to add to the rotation. But yeah, very, very cool. Take my money, NBA, take my money. But some people that we would like to see in some Nets jerseys would be Kevin Durant and Blake Griffin. It came out this week that Steve Nash, head coach, couldn't really give a date for KD's next scan, and he didn't really want to say when Blake Griffin would debut. How does that make you guys feel? Annoyed, concerned, understandable? What do you guys think?
I think you could definitely say concern, but one thing you couldn't say is surprise with this. I think I'm not going to go into the Nets history of how they deal with injuries, because I talk about it all the time, but we all know how cautious they are with everything, so I'm not surprised by it at all. If I'm being honest, I think there must be something going on with Kevin Durant and this injury. I don't think it's anything too serious, but the fact that Malika Andrews was told that he was going to be getting his scan on Friday past, and then it was moved to this coming week, but there's not been any information why that was. And you just got to think something's happened there, and why did it change? Because you have to think if they are wanting to get him back in the court as soon as possible, then why would they extend that even further? So there must be something there. But in terms of like my own opinion, I'm not overly concerned. I mean, as long as we get a healthy KD back, then I'm not fussed at all. And if it's what Shams reported today as we record, that's going to be a week or two or something like that, then I'm absolutely fine with that. But I'd be a lot more comfortable if that is the case and it is just a week or two and it's not, say, holding him out for a longer time, because I'd like to see him get a good amount of minutes before we do go into playoff basketball. I mean, I've seen loads of people coming out and saying that keep him out until the playoffs, and I think they're absolutely crazy, because you can't go from no basketball to playoff basketball. It just sounds dangerous because the intensity is a whole different level, as we know. And yeah, I just wouldn't like to see him coming back, especially off of the injury he had last year. But in terms of Blake Griffin, I'm not overly concerned. I mean, I personally thought he'd be straight in playing, but Matt made a great point in our Discord to say that he hasn't played basketball in over a month before this, and it's a new system, and obviously he's still adjusting to Brooklyn and things like that. So yeah, it makes sense to keep him out for a couple of weeks, but it'd be good to see him in the next couple of games.
For KD, I wouldn't say I'm kind of concerned, but I would kind of say I am at the same time, just the kind of fact that it was maybe only be out a week or whatever. Now it's just kind of went on and on and on, and there's not really been much more clarity on it. And the fact that the scans is no real kind of certainty, and of course, the team was absolutely nothing. We're just free fans from across the pond, so they're not us. They kind of, but yes, it's just a kind of bizarre way that we've handled it, and you just hope that he's back soon. Obviously, we've managed all right without him. It's not like we've been really struggling and massively need him back. I think when you can have a player like Kevin Durant in your team, you want him back. You need him in that team. There's no, oh, well, we can just continue to do without him. Obviously, it's been great that Kyrie and James Harden have stepped up and done the business in his absence. But as Aidan says, come playoff time, it's going to be a whole new ball game. We need all three kind of at the top of their game. And if we're keeping KD out long term, it's going to take him longer to get back up to speed. As for Griffin, I think we'd mentioned it on the previous podcast, it was perhaps in the Discord, that Griffin had kind of said he wasn't actually injured. And I think that certainly fills me with confidence. And it is just a case of he's just got to kind of get used to things. And I think I'd rather he came in fully fit and having a bit of an idea about the system rather than being chucked right in. Obviously, James Harden kind of come immediately in, but that was a bit different. He'd been playing basketball and he was kind of ready. And I'd say James Harden's a much better player than Blake Griffin, so you can kind of expect Harden to just do his own thing and get on all right, whereas Griffin, because I'm a vastly different player, someone who's had multiple kind of physical issues. So yeah, I can kind of understand why the Nets have taken this approach with him, and I just hope that we see the pair of them back soon, because I think when we see all the kind of full strength Nets, something that we've very rarely seen. Probably the last time was one of the first games of the season, actually, that we had a completely empty kind of injury list. It'll be a really nice sight to see.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me, do you remember, as much as we say that, like, we trust the front office with this kind of stuff and we're really, really cautious, I remember last season when Kyrie was sort of out with his injury problems and stuff, there was a little bit of frustration from the fans. It's just like, look, we're not saying that to bring him back right away, but we just want to know something. And I think that's kind of a little bit where we're at the moment. Obviously, TLC was out for a little while. Jeff Green was out for a little while, and it could be argued that they kind of came back. You know, probably had a couple of games where they may have been able to come back sort of later than they did, or sooner than they did rather. But with KD and Blake specifically, I think there's even more need to be cautious, which kind of you guys have obviously alluded to, like KD's Achilles. Also, obviously doesn't, you want to be really, really, really careful with that, and you don't come aggravating it. Blake Griffin needing to get back up to speed with the new team. I can see him, if he starts before he's ready and he doesn't really perform very well, then that in comes the barrage of abuse saying that he's washed, and that would be an absolute ball ache. But yeah, so that's the only thing I'm thinking of why it might kind of frustrate Nets fans. Yeah, the only thing I can think of is if we give it another couple of weeks, right? Any more than another couple of weeks, with KD having to book another scan, Blake to get some really decent sort of training time underneath his belt. The next time we play the Knicks is the 5th of April. I expect both of them to be playing by then and have a couple of games. But then, as you say, Aidan, it's just like maybe KD's kind of sitting courtside watching this team win, 12 of the last 13? And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to kind of let these guys handle their business, and there's absolutely no rush. So, it's a really nice joker in the pack to have KD ready to come in, but there's no real reason to rush him back. As you quite rightly say, we want to get maybe 15, 20 games of all these three players together and Blake Griffin in together to really, really build some chemistry. Because the last thing we want to be is the Clippers from last year, where everyone would kind of say, we'll work it out. We'll work it out when it comes to playoff time. These players can just turn it on. And you can't. It's just not doable, because everyone sort of ramps up their level of play when it comes into the playoffs. So, hopefully they'll be back sooner rather than later, and we can, get even better. I kind of expect us to take a bit of a dip and a wobble when they do come back, because that's just natural when it comes to sort of new players coming into schemes and stuff. But we've got a high old ceiling, so I expect no drama whatsoever. But in a couple of weeks, this Nets roster could look a lot different, with Woj in the news this week saying that PJ Tucker is a target of the Nets. Obviously, it seems like not a week can go by, lads, without us talking about potential people linked with this team or people having signed for the Nets. If we focus on PJ Tucker for just a second, would you take PJ Tucker? It looks like probably a trade rather than like the buyout sort of just free agent signing that we've been accustomed to with Blake Griffin. Shams said we're not interested. Woj says we are. What would it take you to take PJ Tucker?
I think it's clear, based on the kind of past few days between Woj and Shams, that someone's telling pokies. There's someone not quite telling the truth here. And so Shams reports the most recent one, so whether that is actually up to date or not, but Woj certainly hasn't come up and said anything kind of different to what he's previously reported. So, I really don't know if we're interested or not. Based on his performances this season, I definitely wouldn't touch PJ Tucker with a 10-foot barge pole. He has been absolutely horrendous. But in the recent crossover pod we done with the UK Knicks fans, I did actually say players like that, they're maybe the victim of just being in a really poor team. I think it'll be hard kind of for these veterans to really up their game and want to do well when they know they're probably just going to get shipped out soon while this team goes in a rebuild. Obviously, Houston have kind of blown themselves up with that Harden trade. And yeah, I mean, Tucker certainly probably isn't the player that they're thinking of having around for much longer. I think he's, 35 now. So, I mean, I think if we were able to add him in, he's a fantastic veteran presence, can shoot the free and can defend as well. I was watching a wee video of him earlier today, defend LeBron. So obviously, we've had lots of people say, oh, well, how will we stop LeBron and stuff? And I'm not saying PJ Tucker's the answer, but knowing that he's got that kind of experience, that can maybe rub off onto other players and can help us. And let's be honest, any help's welcome. And yeah, and with regards to what I'd give up for him, it certainly wouldn't be a lot, maybe a second round pick, but even then, that might be a bit too much. There's maybe someone kind of at the bottom of our bench that we could just kind of swap and get rid of on an expiring contract, but I'm not kind of sure how salaries kind of add up.
Yeah, I mean, I read Shams' article he put out on The Athletic this morning as we record, and yeah, it was the Nets show. It was just everything seemed to be about Brooklyn. And yeah, that PJ Tucker, it was an interesting thing because he didn't seem to give too much information. And obviously he went on to say that the Nets are no longer interested. And usually when that's the case, you tend to get a bit more information that comes out after the trade talks are finished. So you just wonder if there potentially is still something there. Personally, I hope there isn't. I'm glad we're kind of no longer interested if that's the case, because I think we'd be getting absolutely robbed giving up Dinwiddie's contract for PJ. I mean, even though Dinwiddie is injured, I mean, he is still a valuable player because of his bird rights. And we've already had reports that there's been a large amount of teams around the league that have been interested in acquiring those. Personally, I think there's probably something more to it. I think if you probably ask the Rockets straight up if they take Dinwiddie for PJ Tucker, I think they'd bite your hand off. But I think Marks must have been looking for a pick off them, or potentially something else as well, maybe a Daniel House Jr. or something like that. So there must be a reason why they said no, because I think they'd be absolutely crazy not to take Dinwiddie for PJ Tucker, who doesn't want to be there anymore. And in terms of what Shams said about, he said the reason that they're no longer interested is because they signed Blake Griffin. I see him as a much better option, and obviously we got Blake for free. Yeah, as Cammy mentioned, PJ's not been performing well this year. He's always been known for his kind of elite defensive effort, but I've not seen it this year. And if I'm going off a couple of games that I've watched Houston and that Nets game, yeah, he doesn't look interested. And I know he could be a victim of playing on a really poor team, but is that what you really want to see from a guy that wants to get on a contender? Someone that's just not going to put in the effort because they're on a poor team? I just don't like it myself, and I think we've certainly got a better deal by getting Blake Griffin in.
It's Shams versus Woj again, that kind of the battle of the breaking news. I think we've already got a veteran center who we've got questions about in DJ, but he's been playing really well as of late. But like you guys, I am absolutely comfortable with missing out on some PJ Tucker. He's not particularly efficient. He's a low impact kind of guy playing a lot of minutes. He's averaging 30 minutes a night on this terrible Rockets team. So, he's probably the least interested I would be of the names that have come out. Obviously we'll get onto a little bit more of those two later, but yeah, I hope for his, you always want to see someone do well, no matter who it is in the NBA. And I hope it is that he's just a victim of this, being stuck on a bad team of 14th loss in a row or something on this Rockets team. It just can't be a decent place to be. I know he's a man with an extensive sneaker collection, so I think moving to New York would probably be of benefit to him with all the sneaker boutiques that he could frequent. But as far as coming on this Nets team, I don't think there's a need for PJ Tucker. Obviously, you spoke about his defensive prowess, but does he really move the needle that much in terms of what we'd have to give up for him? I'm not sure. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, you can keep PJ Tucker. Thank you very much. And the reason I say that is because there's still these circulating rumors about Andre Drummond. I'm sure Aidan's going to double down on his assurances that Andre Drummond is going to finish this season in a Nets jersey. But Shams is also stating that the Nets and the Lakers are the top suitors for Andre Drummond in the event of a buyout, but the Cavs want a trade. The noisy neighbors, the Knicks, have also explored the possibility of getting him on board. But Chris Haynes from Yahoo has also been reporting that the Nets are interested in trading for either him or JaVale McGee. Obviously, Andre Drummond, JaVale McGee, both fodder for this podcast over this season. How are you guys feeling about the potential big man moves on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, Shams and Chris Haynes are really just confirming what we already knew. There was plenty of rumours around, and as we always say, there's certainly no smoke without a fire, and that's obviously true if the big guns are now reporting about it. And it's what I find really interesting about this coming out, because obviously both stories came out on the same day, is that it all seemed to kind of come out at once. It would not surprise me in the slightest if this is the Nets front office that's releasing all this information. The reason I say that is because the Nets are obviously desperate for a playoff level centre on this team, and they're clearly being aggressive in doing so with the amount of names that they've been in touch with. Drummond is clearly target number one for this team, and they'll obviously kind of go all in to get him in a buyout if it does come to that. And then they're obviously looking at options like McGee, and I think I heard Mason Plumlee through the week as another name that they were looking at. So they're obviously trying to get someone in. The thing that I was speaking to Matt earlier on, and I mentioned what's really interesting is that the buyout market seems to happen after the trade deadline ends. It's almost like if they can't find a move for someone, that's when they decide to buy someone out because they couldn't get anything for them. They thought, right, we might as well just buy them out. The issue with that is obviously Drummond is the Nets' main target, but Drummond's also the Lakers' main target as well. So if they're holding out for Andre Drummond to be bought out, and then the trade deadline ends, and then Andre Drummond makes his decision, and then he decides to go to the Lakers, then we can't get anyone unless there's another buyout centre. So it does make makes it really difficult for the Nets. And hopefully, if Drummond is keen to come to Brooklyn, then he forces a buyout before that. Otherwise, if they get an idea that he may want to go to somewhere like the Lakers, then they will probably see a trade somewhere. But yeah, I'm going to stick with it, Matt. I still think Drummond is going to be a Brooklyn Nets player at some point. And I think he'll choose us over the Lakers.
I certainly like to hope that's the case as well. Obviously, with JaVale McGee as well, though, I think it's worth noting he always seems to win championships. Won championships in Golden State and most recently with the Lakers. And I think maybe not going to give you tons of points tonight or anything like that, but just having that presence as there is a few guys in the team who've obviously won championships, most notably KD and Kyrie have won chips. But yeah, I mean, I think if you could add either or, it definitely boosts the team. As you said earlier on the podcast, DeAndre Jordan has kind of found form. He's a bit better than he has been. Looks a bit more bothered than he was in the start of the season. But I still think if you had the chance to take Andre Drummond who could quite easily be a 20 and 20 guy a night because he's just an absolute rebound machine. I mean, yeah, you take that all day, and then JaVale McGee, obviously quite a cool guy off the court as well. Does good YouTube stuff, so good to kind of build that culture that people claim we've lost. So yeah, I mean, I'd certainly be happy with either. I think if it came down to trading, I'm not quite sure what either would take. Obviously, both at the Cavs, and I think the Cavs are certainly due as a favour for Jarrett Allen. So maybe they'll be a bit kinder and not take as much. But yeah, I think if either player really wants to leave, I'd like to hope that they will kind of push for the Nets rather than the Lakers. Obviously, McGee has just left the Lakers, so I can't see him pushing to go back there. I'm not even sure if they're interested, but certainly Drummond, I think the chance to play with KD and Kyrie and Harden maybe has a bit of a greater pool than LeBron and AD. As fantastic as that would be.
Yeah, the main thing that kind of jumps out to me on that kind of Drummond versus McGee, if you're pitting those two against each other, and obviously there's your head kind of says obviously Andre Drummond is the better player and the more productive player. It's like, do we need that much production from another sort of big? Which sounds stupid to say, but unless Andre Drummond is happy to sacrifice his numbers to potentially be part of this and win championship, maybe JaVale McGee's probably the smarter choice, because Andre, as you kind of said, he's going to be 20. He's got the capability of being 20 and 20. But that kind of does fly in the face of what the Nets have been running this season anyway. You know, we've had Bruce Brown, who's, God love him, he's 6'4", and he's, you know, one of our best centers options. So you swap that out for Andre Drummond, we're going to have to play a completely different scheme. You might have to, you know, play a little bit more post play and all that kind of stuff. The ball kind of slows up, all that kind of stuff. Unless, you know, he and Harden just turn into the best pick and roll pairing in the NBA. You know, we're going to have to sort of adjust what we're doing at the moment, and adjusting something that seems to be working really, really well is sort of a bit daunting. So that's just something that I thought I'd flag up just in just as a devil's advocate type of thing. But obviously you would in a vacuum, you'd take Andre Drummond over JaVale McGee. But yeah, it's a nice problem to have. It's still strange to see the Nets in all these trade rumors, because it seems like everyone and their dog wants to be part of this Nets team, which, you know, is great. And all goes back to Lewis Scola, that we kind of said that as soon as they start winning, everyone's gonna want to come here. So fingers crossed that's the case. So that brings us on to the games from this week past. Obviously, we were still kind of half on the All-Star break, which was nice in one step, nice for the players, not so nice for us. So we were kind of without some basketball to consume for a few days, and it did feel a bit weird. But we were back in action on Thursday as we took the W against Boston, which is always nice, taking the win 121-109. Guys, what did you make of the Boston game?
So my key point from this Boston game, and I think it's quite an obvious one, it was the main kind of talking point from this game, and that was Kyrie's 40 bomb. Now, this was his joint best points total of the season, following his previous 40 bomb against the Kings, although not quite as efficient. But I mean, we're not going to get that picky. And can you really have a bad 40 bomb? I mean, his first quarter was a bit poor. I think he was under 50% shooting, and it didn't look like it was going to be his night. But then kind of as things went on, he just got better and better. Second quarter, perfect shooting, 100%, and got 12 points. Third quarter, they then got 14 points. And then in the fourth, they only played about half, but still managed to get 8 points. So, yeah, I mean, he had as many points on his own as the rest of the starters did combined, which is just mind-blowing. And, yeah, on a day that maybe wasn't the next day, we still managed to come off with the win, but Kyrie and his 40 bomb were certainly huge in that. I also noticed, looking at the kind of stat sheet, that he had the best offensive rating and best defensive ratings in the entire team, with 147 and 109 respectively. So yeah, a very, very good performance from our man Kai.
It's just crazy that we've got so much offensive power, and we've got two guys that can still score 40 points on any given night, despite Kevin Durant being out injured. So yeah, we're absolutely blessed to have someone like that. And yeah, Kyrie was absolutely incredible. But I just want to give a shout out to our bench again, because yeah, I've kind of talked about it over the last few weeks, and they are getting better and better, and they're becoming more of a luxury for the team. In particular, in this one, Landry Shamet, I mean, his stock continues to rise night after night, and it's great to see that the player that we traded our first round pick has been absolutely worth it. Because I know we all had our doubts at the start, but yeah, he's certainly showing the potential that Sean Marks obviously saw in him. And I mean, he came off the bench and he shot 4 from 5 from 3, 14 points in total in only 15 minutes. And you can't really ask for much more off of the bench. I mean, talk about an impact. I mean, it wasn't just his shooting efficiency that was kind of notable on the night. It was the timing of his threes. I mean, the Celtics were on top of the game on quite a few occasions, and Shamet was the kind of leading the bench to stop that firepower when, say, Harden or Kyrie were taking a rest. So it is so important to have someone like that can come on and get points in those important moments. But it's his confidence as well. I just see a different Shamet on the court, and I just think he is kind of showing that confidence, and he has found his shooting well being on the nets. And yeah, I think he's been great. I mean, it's easy to forget that obviously Shamet did have a few DNPs not too long ago after some bad form. And I mean, what a turnaround it's been for him, and all credit to him. I mean, there was a few critics of Shamet. I say a few, there was a lot of critics of Shamet, us included at times. So yeah, you've got to give credit to the guy. I think he's been fantastic in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I saw a stat from Shamet where over the last in December, he averaged 6 points on 25% from 3. But now in the month of March, obviously halfway through now, he's averaging 12 points a game on 47.8% from 3. So the man's come a long way. But the thing I noticed from that Celtics game was, it was one of them ugly wins, and it won't show up in that win-loss column on which ones were dominant and which ones were ugly. But this one was ugly. They say you live and die by the 3 in the modern NBA, and my goodness, did this Nets team almost killed themselves with a poor start shooting the ball. I think the first quarter the Nets were like at 3 from 11 from 3. And, only those 3 that we did make were all Landry Shamet. So we were something like 27% in that first quarter from free. We picked it back up again sort of as the game grew on, but sort of in the first half of the season, so the first quarter of the season, I guess, we'd see that however the Nets started a game sort of dictated how we'd finish it. And it was kind of an early indicator of sort of how we'd go as the game progressed. But with this Nets team rolling, I actually think, that's not the case anymore. And we can kind of turn ourselves around. I mean, you see particularly James Harden pulling people to one side and saying, you missed this, you missed that. We need to get better at this and this. But this Nets team's rolling now, and I think you probably learn more from grinding out these ugly wins rather than the flashy blowouts or 40 point ball games from people and absolute dominant wins. So the thing that sort of jumped out at me was we closed the game on a 13-3 run, which is sort of the exact kind of game management you want to see out of your players. And I think it seems to have all hinged on the previous Detroit game where, you hear these urban legends of, I say urban legends, like it's a stupid thing. You hear on Twitter that Jeff Green had a players only meeting or something, and something went down after that Detroit game. And it's led us to the role that we're on at the moment. So, since then, I think there's been a real kind of mindset shift in this Nets team that we don't let these games get away from us anymore. And we can really kick on and dig deep and find results. But talking about Detroit Pistons games, we got our revenge on Saturday just gone. We were kind of hoping for a Blake Griffin revenge game after, they made him sit and seeing what the trade market was like for the man. But he didn't sit. He looked very, very nice in his snazzy cardigan, snazzy jumper that everyone was kind of commenting on Twitter. But we did take the game 100-95. What do you guys make of the latest Pistons game?
Well, we heard MVP chants around the arena for Kyrie against the Celtics, and we heard MVP chants around the arena in the fourth quarter for James Harden. And I'm not surprised because it was incredible in the fourth quarter, the way he managed to take over the game. I mean, Harden didn't play well in this game, and he still got a triple-double. And it just shows that his standards are just as high could be. And I'm not going to lie, no one really played well in this game, bar say Joe Harris and our guy Landry Shamet. But I mean, Harden's fourth quarter in this one was, it was exquisite. It was just incredible. And I mean, James Harden's always been famous for his 3-point shooting since he really kind of took off from the Rockets. But he has been in a bit of a slump with actually his 3-point shooting at the moment. But the good thing about this is he actually realised it. And we saw as another kind of elite scoring part of his game by getting to the rim. And he just does it with ease. And I think Harden scored, the Nets' last 10 points in this one, which was obviously a pretty rough night overall. Any time the Nets only scored 100 points is relatively rough. But someone mentioned in our Discord, we would have lost this game before the new year. And what's the difference between before the new year and now is James Harden. And I mean, I've always kind of said there's two types of superstars, and there's only really one thing that separates them. And the thing there's a certain type of player that's able to take over a game and grind out a win on any night. Some superstars don't have it, and their skills don't always translate to winning basketball. I'm not going to name anyone in particular, but I think you can tell who they are by their team's records. But James Harden has got that skill. Kyrie Irving has got that skill, and Kevin Durant has that skill. And we may never see something like that again, where you've got three players in your team that can take over a game like that in the fourth quarter. And it was Harden's turn on this night, and it was really, really good to see and get that win over Detroit that we so badly needed.
As you said, few players kind of showed up in this one, but a boy who did set him up here and celebrated his birthday in style was Landry Shamet off after his kind of performance against the Celtics, which Aidan so expertly described. I was really excited to kind of see Shamet in action in this one. We've seen him score lots of points in games, but then completely fall off a cliff the following game. But yeah, another big game, 15 points, really efficient night. He had 6 shots and then free from the free throw line as well. And yeah, 83% field goal percentage. And I'd like to think that this is how Shamet come good. As he's kind of said earlier on, it wasn't that long ago he wasn't even playing. There were so many games earlier on in the season where he was just downright atrocious, and we were all really questioning why we traded for him. But in the 4 of the last 6 games, he's hitting double figures, and yeah, I mean, for so long it didn't seem like he could buy a basket, but now he's getting tons. So yeah, fantastic turnaround from him, and hopefully this continues, because the more scoring options we've got, the better, especially on nights when Kyrie, KD, and Harden, even though, as we say, Harden got the triple-double without really trying or without really doing very well, having that extra player, whether he comes off the bench or whether he starts, and can give you that 10-plus points a night, I think that's invaluable. If your bench can all average that, you're going to win lots of games. And come playoff time, yeah, you're going to win lots of playoff games too. So yeah, fantastic from Shamet once again.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I remember after the Harden trade, we were like, well, our depth's gone. Our depth is dead. We don't have a bench. Our bench is rubbish. It's trash. We've got 4 good players and that's it. And then, we've got to just pray or something like that. But as this season's kind of rolled on, I'm not sure if it's the Harden effect or if it's, people just click in and, all these people are professional basketball players and the winning, breeds good habits, and being in a position to maybe challenge for a championship has maybe brought the best out of these players. But we're a deep team. You said earlier in this pod, Cammy, like talking about people to kind of trade for PJ Tucker and you'd maybe chuck in an end of a bench guy. It's just like, who's in the end of the bench now? Like, you don't know. Like, we've got such a really deep team. It's really staggering, but that didn't stop us from having what I thought was probably the worst shooting night we've had for a real long time against this Detroit Pistons team. As you say, any time we score only 100 points, then, that something didn't really go to plan. And it was just another weird one for me. The Nets have showed over the last 2 games that their elite shooting can disappear for a while, like any other team. We saw again in this game against the Pistons. Harden and James Harden and Kyrie Irving were both 0 for 6 from 3. Joey Buckets could only muster 2 of 5. You guys have touched on Landry Shamet continuing his ascent with another strong performance. But overall, it was another poor night from deep, which is really weird. But well, I say poor from the Nets' lofty standards. The Nets still attempted more shots than the Pistons did throughout this game. So I think that's kind of what kept them in touch. And we got, we scored, to coin a phrase from Shaquille O'Neal about free throws, we made the ones we needed to make. But yeah, it certainly just wasn't a pretty one. But again, 2 games on the bounce where earlier on in the season, we wouldn't have won these games. We would have rolled over and just, put it down to experience or something like that. But really good to see. And nice to get that Detroit Pistons monkey off our back, much like we did with the Wizards earlier on this season. Kind of, it's nice to get those ones back. But that's it. Obviously, that's only the 2 games to talk about from last week, which is weird to talk about from these weekly look backs. But that takes us on to the listener questions. Thanks again to everyone who has submitted a question. This one is from Tyler from our UK Nets fans Discord server. He said, "Gentlemen, put your GM caps on and navigate the Nets through the upcoming off season. Look at expiring contracts for us and other veteran players. Who do you extend and who do you pick up?" Who wants to take this one first?
I'll take this one first, and obviously I'll very handedly, people won't see this, I have put a nice wee list together, so yeah, it makes the job a bit easier to kind of just remember the names off the top of the head, because whilst we've not got that many expiring contracts, there are quite a lot of notable upcoming veteran free agents that we could quite easily forget, because there just is that kind of big of a pool of upcoming free agents. With regards to our expiring contracts, we've got Spencer Dinwiddie expiring. He has a player option worth $12.3 million. We have Jeff Green, Tyler Johnson, TLC, and Bruce Brown also expiring. Of that handful of players, I'm signing Jeff Green and Bruce Brown up again. Not too fussed if Tyler Johnson and TLC go. Also players who've had their moments, but yeah, they're not really the kind of superstars. They're not earning a lot, and yeah, maybe they're all right for the end of the bench, but who knows, with some of these veteran free agents that I'm going to discuss, there's maybe better options in. Then with regards to Dinwiddie, I think we've spoken a lot about Dinwiddie in recent weeks. He's obviously ramping up in his kind of recovery. We're seeing videos almost daily from him out in LA recovering, and I think it doesn't look like he's wanting to be here. We say this now every week, so I think if you can get a trade done, you do that, whether it's for just a kind of other expiring contract for a fit player, I don't know, but certainly I can't see us keeping him, and I think we will trade him. As for the upcoming kind of free agents, notable ones, JJ Redick. A few podcasts ago, we kind of discussed him and his Brooklyn connections. Obviously, a guy who can shoot the three and a real veteran presence who's done really well. Some young players like Zion, you've seen a lot of him doing really well this season. Then obviously Jared Dudley, another one who's up, a player who we know all too well. And I mean, yeah, maybe this one's the kind of heart overruling the head. It would just be nice to see him back. I had mentioned in a previous podcast that D'Lo and Karis LeVert's deals are up, I think, in 2 years' time. So yeah, if you can kind of get the band back together, what piece by piece, Jared Dudley would be a start. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of names out there that we could go for. And I think, as I say, you keep Jeff Green and Bruce Brown, I'm quite happy. And then if you can bring in JJ Redick, I'm happy as well. And then yeah, it just kind of depends on the rest. But there's certainly plenty of options there for us.
Yeah, I mean, if the Nets win it all this year, then I'm definitely going to try and bring back some of the guys that were already here. I mean, I'm looking at guys like Jeff Green. I'd probably take Tyler Johnson back. I mean, he's had his payday thanks to the Nets, so he probably owes us another vetman deal for a decent production off the bench. And yeah, I mean, you'd be silly not to have Bruce Brown on this team for what he's given so far. I was really interested in what you mentioned, obviously, about Spencer Dinwiddie. There's something I didn't actually click from what happened this week, was that Steve Nash actually got asked a question about Dinwiddie, and he said that he hadn't spoke to him in a couple of weeks, and I thought that was really strange. And it could be quite telling, the fact that they are obviously trying to move in, that maybe they're just kind of letting him do his own thing out there. But yeah, I thought it was a strange thing. But yeah, back to the point. Yeah, in terms of guys that they're looking to bring in, yeah, I think JJ Redick to the Nets is certainly something that everything seems to line up that he's eventually going to be a Net at some point. I mean, he lives in Brooklyn, in some fancy apartment. Worth checking out his apartment tour on YouTube if you've not seen that, where he shows off just a extravagant art collection that he's kind of going into deep detail about all this art. So yeah, well worth a watch there. Guys like Trevor Ariza again, he's been linked with us a couple of times. Another nice piece that we might pick up, kind of similar to someone like Carmelo Anthony, just due to kind of friendships with the Nets, and the fact that if the Nets do well, get to the finals, win this year potentially, that you may start seeing players take a discount just to come and play and try and get a chip next year. I think the mid-level exception next year, we'll certainly try and get someone a bit quicker there. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe future Net Andre Drummond doesn't get offered a big contract in the summer, and he may decide to come back to the Nets. I'm going to say that like it's fact over possibility there, because I'm still talking it into existence, or someone like a Hassan Whiteside. But yeah, I'm not overly thinking about these kind of veteran free agents at the moment. I mean, if the Nets do well this year, I'm more than happy to keep the bones of what we have just now. But yeah, a couple of these names coming in and helping us next year certainly wouldn't hurt.
Absolutely. I think in terms of expirings, I think, as much as it pains me to say it, I think we're going to trade Spencer. Sorry, everyone. But I think I'm trying to convince myself that it's for his best interest that he goes and, really, really has his own team somewhere. What I thought was interesting is, if we didn't trade for James Harden and Spencer was healthy this season, then maybe, would Spencer then turn into this playmaking sort of maestro that James Harden has become into. And I'm not for a moment, and please don't come at me, I'm not for a moment suggesting that Spencer Dinwiddie is on the same level as James Harden, but I'm just saying, would he have found that niche on it? He's been our go-to guy for a couple of years for clutch moment scoring and all this kind of stuff. He's had to do a lot of jobs for this Nets team, but with Harden coming in and filling such a gap that I don't think many people were kind of saying that we needed to fill in terms of that playmaking spot. I don't know if that's just an interesting little wrinkle. But going back to Tyler's question, I think same as you guys, I'd absolutely lock up Jeff Green. He's not earning enough money for the impact that he's given this team this season. Again, I'd lock up Bruce Brown as well. It'd be interesting to see what he'd actually be like given more guard minutes. As we've said, it's been a bit of a joke that he's our starting center, but he's in a really, really unique position. And should this team kind of lose a few key pieces and he has to kind of go back to his more traditional role, it'd be interesting to see what kind of how he kind of plays that. Obviously, he's still a really, really good defender. So it'll probably be down that kind of role. But in terms of notable upcoming vets, I've kind of set the same sort of thing as you guys with JJ Redick. Just makes sense. He'd slot onto any team with championship aspirations with his sharpshooting acumen and those Brooklyn connections. But I've always kind of been a fan of Paul Millsap ever since his Hawks days. I wouldn't mind seeing him in a Nets shirt. Obviously, the Nets have always kind of needed a power forward for years and years and years. And Paul Millsap has always kind of been on my kind of personal radar. So I'd love to see him. Those good Atlanta Hawks teams from, I don't know, maybe 2016 maybe were really, really fun. So be good to see a little bit of that coming over to BK. But yeah, I think, I'm just talking from myself. I'm glad that there are people that are a lot more qualified and capable in these positions than me and your average Nets Twitter guy, because there's no easy task and you've always got to be thinking 10 steps ahead. But thanks for that, Tyler. But we're going to go on to the next listener question, which is from Theo from Met the Criteria, who dropped in our UK Nets fans Discord server. He said, given what we've seen of the Nets, 76ers and the West so far, do you think the Nets would have been able to contend for the chip without the signing of James Harden? Now, I've got some pretty steadfast opinions about this, but what do you guys think?
I mean, you could look at it in two ways. I think, and we were all saying at the start that, yes, I mean, I think the Nets would have competed with what we had at the start, and we would have still kind of been up there in the names for kind of winning it all. But yeah, I think obviously having James Harden makes that chance a lot stronger, but I think we would have still had a good chance. However, obviously with what we've had to put up with so far this year, obviously with injuries, contact tracing protocols and things like that, who knows where we would be sitting right now if we didn't have James Harden. I mean, yeah, I think you can look at Harden. Obviously, we talked about what Woj said the other week, where they're now classing Harden as a necessity move. You can almost class him as an insurance piece, just with what we've had to put up with. Obviously, with Kyrie taking time out and Durant taking time out as well, because obviously they've both seen minutes out where Harden's had to kind of put the team on his back at times. So yeah, I do think we would have been up there come playoff time if we had Kyrie and Durant healthy, which I think we will. But yeah, and obviously we would have had Karis and Jarrett Allen as well. But yeah, I still think it's so much stronger having Harden in that team, and I couldn't be more sure about that. But yeah, I think we probably would have still at least made it to the finals.
I mean, I think even from the first kind of episode of this season's podcast, we were all saying it was kind of championship or bust almost. And yeah, also the trade happened and we're without doubt a stronger team now. And the fact, as Aidan says, KD and Kyrie have both kind of had their injury problems. So Harden has come in. He's kind of kept us on track in their absence. And I think without him, it would have been a bit of a problem. We would have still also had Karis and Jarrett Allen had that move not happened. But I don't think Karis and Jarrett Allen would have been able to quite carry the team like James Harden has on some nights. So yeah, with regards to Phil's question, I think we'd have still contended. But with Harden in the team, it's only heightened the kind of expectations from us and heightened our chances of ultimately winning the championship come the summer.
Yeah, I'm less confident if there was no Harden, but if we're talking hypothetical seasons and there were no Harden, but if there were a KD, for example, then I think that changes things. Like pre-Harden, there were a lot more questions than there are now. And I think that's due in large part to Harden's playmaking, which we talked to a lot already tonight. But where would you get that playmaking if it weren't for Harden? Would Kyrie still be a point guard? We all know he's a shooting guard now. So who would run the point? Would it be Chris Chiosa? We don't know. But yeah, I think it's a funny one, really. Like, I think, like you guys said, we would have probably been in the mix, but I think after this Harden trade, we are probably among the favorites, and I think that's being conservative. Yeah, I still think we would have done enough to kind of scrap our way there, but I think a lot more would have had to go our way. Aidan, you bring up a really good point about the kind of just the faff that's gone around with all this contact tracing stuff and being out and being available and resting players and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's fortunately we're not in that position. We are in the position where, you know, we're half a game off the top seed in the East, which I don't know about you guys, but could the Sixers please just bloody lose a game so we can bunny hop those guys into first? Because it seems like we've been half a game behind the Sixers for a couple of weeks now, and you know, I would love to see us top of that tree. But yeah, we are where we are, and you know, it's nice to be in contention with James Harden. But we're going to look ahead to the games of the week now. We are actually recording on a Monday night, which is rare for BKT UK podcast, and we are a couple of hours away from the Battle of the Boroughs. If you've not listened to our last podcast, we actually hooked up with Martin and Scott from the UK Knicks Across the Pond podcast this week to chat a little bit about the game and how the Knicks have gone this season, how the Nets have gone this season, who really is the king of New York. We also asked them how the hell they actually stick being Knicks fans, and how many tubs of Mr. Sheen it does take to polish up those "we get all the back pages" titles that they seem to be winning all over the shop. But yeah, we'll have to save our recap of this latest Knicks game until next week, unfortunately. But then we also take on the Pacers on Wednesday, and then Friday night we take a trip to Orlando to face the Magic. Gentlemen, how do you think we'll do against these three teams? Do you think we can sweep it, or are there going to be any banana skins?
I think we can sweep this. Also, the Knicks, we beat them last time with a very threadbare kind of roster. We had 9 players available on that night and still managed to get past them. That was obviously pre-Harden, and yeah, how we managed to win that with so few players was very impressive. And I think Harden will just go off, and also I've got Kyrie as well. So I think that this one's going to be a real entertaining one. Wednesday night's obviously going to be a really special one. Caris LeVert recently made his return to action after his kind of recent cancer scare, and fantastic to see him. So it'll be lovely to just kind of see him in action. Made quite a good return to, I think it was 13 points in his return. So yeah, great to see him back. I think we will beat them. I think they're 9th or 10th in the conference at the moment. So a team we should be beating, and then a team we actually should be beating is Orlando, sitting 14th, and I've lost the last 8 in a row, and I don't think there's any excuses to lose to them. And yeah, I think we've got to sweep this week, keep the momentum going. We were obviously a bit sluggish last week, and I'm just hoping that now we've kind of had those 2 games, we're now back in the swing of things, and I think we ultimately need to be, with the Sixers losing Joel Embiid for the foreseeable future due to his kind of scary injury. It's as nasty as it sounds. It's a chance that the Nets have got to kind of take advantage of, and if we can get into first and solidify it, whilst the Sixers maybe struggle to sort things out in Embiid's absence, then we've got to do it, because if we can get into first, it also gets us a better seed, and yeah, got to do that. So I'm going to have a sweep this week.
Yeah, get those brushes out, boys, because yeah, I've got a sweep in this week again. Once again, I think I've said it for the last about 3 or 4 weeks now, but yeah, I'm that confident. I mean, the Nets are building momentum, and I just can't see us losing to the talent that we've got in front of us this week. I mean, this next game tonight, must win in my eyes. You've got to keep the guys across the bridge quiet, and they are getting a bit too confident. So yeah, be a good kind of attitude adjustment if we can go in there and really give them get a good win against the Knicks. Yeah, as Cammy mentioned, really excited to see Caris again. Obviously, I didn't really watch kind of much of his first game back, so it'll be nice to see a full game of him. I've always loved Caris's game, so yeah, really looking forward to seeing him back. But I can't see us losing to that Pacers team. And yeah, as for the Magic, I mean, as Cammy mentioned, they are not playing well at all. And I noticed in talks that were coming out about them today that they're just talking about exploding this team and trading. I've seen Vucevic, Fournier, Terence Ross, Aaron Gordon. Will they have any players left when they play us on Friday? Who actually knows? So we'll wait and see there. But yeah, as Cammy mentioned, fingers crossed that we can sneak past the Embiidless Sixers and get the top spot. Seems like a good chance when they've got, say, the Bucks, I think, on Wednesday night. So yeah, hopefully this is the week where we can see the Nets sitting at the top of the conference for the first time at this time of the season anyway, and God knows how long. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I know the Knicks guys have got a couple of guys out as well, which puts us in even better position to take the W there at home against the Knicks in the Battle of the Boroughs. Yeah, it would be absolutely beautiful, to see another full game of Caris LeVert, even though he is in an alien uniform. A lot's been made of Kyrie Irving giving some real good hugs up, post game. But I think he's gonna save an extra special one for Karis. And I think there's going to be a lot of cutting of onions after this game and before this game, maybe when his ex-colleagues get to see Karis LeVert on the court. And obviously, first and foremost, it's great that he's healthy and back playing basketball. Friday night at the Magic, we really need to be winning that game. I've noticed their social media team, their social media has been all about the Lakeland Magic winning the G League season. So that's, they got to take their wins where they can get them at the moment. They've been absolutely murdered with injuries at the moment. Although I did see, just talking on the fly, I saw that the Nets inquired about Aaron Gordon, but I think the Magic wanted, was it Spencer Dinwiddie or someone else that for Aaron Gordon?
I think we were given Dinwiddie, but they wanted a high first round pick or something like that.
That's right. So. Yeah. So very, very interesting. I think, for what butterfly effect that could have caused the Nets if that had come off early on in the season, we'll only have to think about. But that's it. Yeah, I think another 3-0 sweep. But time will tell. Fingers crossed. This is the first. This will be the week where we go top of the East, hopefully. But we shall wait and see. But yeah, thanks, gents, for joining me today. Fingers crossed for another successful week of Brooklyn Nets basketball. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.